everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to have a nice little relaxing day. We're going to make a quilt block on our embroidery machine. And this comes to us from Me Time Machine Embroidery Delivered. Now this fun little box right here is a monthly subscription box. You can either get it delivered to your home like I have, or you can have just the files emailed to you every month. But either way, what you're going to be doing is building quilt blocks on your embroidery machine. And this is so cool. I gotta be honest, it took me a minute to wrap my head around it because I just didn't quite see how that would work. But if you've ever done foundation paper piecing or thought about doing foundation paper piecing, it's kind of similar to that. It's very, very fun, and it's going to give you the most perfect points. So in today's video, we're going to unbox the July box from Perfectly Pieced, and we are going to work through the quilt block, and I'm going to show you just a quick, fun little project to do with the quilt block. Now, I will tell you that I've gone through all the files already. I have already made one of them. The cool thing about this is that there are multiple size quilt blocks you can do. Now, it's all the same design. The quilt block design is the same. However, you can make a 2-inch block, 4-inch, 6-inch, or 8-inch block. And not only do they have all the information for each size blocks, they have very specific projects you can do with each size block, which is so cool. You want to do a pillow, you want to do a bench pillow, you want to do a table runner, you want to placemat. They've got it all. They've got so many ideas and projects and instructions for all of that. So patterns for all of those. So you're not just making a quilt block, you can make a few of them, different sizes, create a whole project out of it, or you could make the quilt blocks and kind of hold them to the side every month, and then after a few months you can put them all together and make yourself a beautiful quilt, which I'm kind of tempted to do that, but we'll see. So like I said, I've already gone through the file and I have tried one out, and this is what we're going to be doing today. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the quilt block design is. You can see we have this beautiful little half square triangle down here, then we've got some nice strips. This is the 4-inch size block, and as you can see, I am making a cute little coaster. I love these fabric coasters. Personally, we have them all over our house. They're perfect for scraps, perfect for everybody. So if you did order just the monthly files and not the actual box, I would suggest you make this a scrappy project, especially if you're going to be doing the coasters. So today we're going to go through the 4-inch block, and we're going to go through how to make this cute little fabric coaster. We've done these a few times on the channel. I'll have some of the other tutorials linked down in the description, but this comes together very quickly, very sweetly, and it doesn't require a whole lot of precision like quilting normally does, which I feel like it's the sloppy person's way to quilt. Because personally, when I'm in a rush, my quilting, the piecing, the project, it all gets a little sloppy because you have to be so detailed with this. But with the embroidery machine, it turns out perfect and it requires very little effort. So thank you so much to Me Time for sponsoring today's video. I am so excited to be a part of this. You guys know, if you've been on the channel for a while, I started out as a quilter. I love quilting. It's kind of funny because I started with quilting, and embroidering machines, that's kind of like the newest thing. So I'm kind of like rainbowing over, from the beginning to what I've just learned how to do, which I think is really neat. I'm excited to just put it all together. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section down below. I will have timestamps for this video. It should be a pretty quick, pretty sweet one. So if you are just looking for how to build the coaster or just how to piece it together on the machine, check the timestamps. They'll be down in the description of this video. They'll also be running along the bottom of the screen right here. All right, guys, let's get started and open up this box. So let's first open up the monthly subscription box, and then we'll go through all of the things we're going to be using today to piece together this adorable little block. So, like I said in the beginning, you don't have to order the physical box. If you've got plenty of fabric and thread and things like that you don't need the extra stuff, then just use what you have and order the monthly files. But you know me, I always opt for a box of goodies when I can. So let's open this up. When you see, oh, look how pretty it is. I love a fancy box. They're so nice. So you can see this is the July 2022 box. And it says you can go to your account where you can find the digital files. So you should have set yourself up an account whenever you subscribed to this box. And in your account, you will find all the monthly files. And guys, there are so many files. It can be a little overwhelming. There are a lot of files. And you don't need a lot of files to make this. It's just there's a lot of options, lots of different sizes, lots of different projects. So we'll go through that in just a moment. But when you open this up, this is going to tell you everything that's in the box. You have a nice assortment of goodies here. Let's go through it. So first here we have the getting started guide. This is going to kind of walk you through what you have, how to use it, how to get everything loaded up. We have the clear blue tile set, which I know are used to help you use your embroidery machine to do quilting. I haven't used these yet. I'm very excited to work with them, but I do want to spend some time on my own really figuring these out before I bring them to the channel. So I'm not going to be using these today. Oh, and look at this. We have an adorable little bundle of fabric. And you know what? It's almost 4th of July here, which means we have a lot of red, white, and blue stuff going on. I think this will be perfect for like an accent pillow, for a table runner, for 4th of July. For me, I can make a few little last-minute coasters, set them around the house whenever we have people over for a barbecue. I love this. So you do have different sizes of material here. You can see this bottom material. You have a lot more of that than you do of the other ones. That's because they want to make sure you have enough material to do the projects that they suggest. So if you're making like a big pillow and you need the bigger pieces that go on the back of it, this is going to be the material you're going to use for that. I love that. You can do a lot of small projects or you can do one big project. They give you everything you need for it. Next, we have some thread here. This is Glide thread. This is a beautiful color, so I'll definitely be using that today. And then we have this sweet, sweet little box of Clover clips. I can never get enough of these. I love them. They're very cute. Mine are orange. I don't know if you get a different color. That'd be kind of cool if they were different colors. But I do like the orange because it matches with the box. I think that's sweet. And then what do we have here on the bottom? Down here, it looks like we have printed out instructions. Oh, this is perfect. I know a lot of you guys like to do this. You can get yourself a 3-ring binder. Put this in the binder, and this gives you all the information. So if you don't want to have your computer open or your iPad open or anything like that with the instructions, you can just keep this in your binder. Can you imagine after like a year or so of this, we're going to have a beautiful binder full of lots of suggestions. So if you're ever just in the embroidery quilt making mood, you can open up your binder and make some blocks. I think that's so cool. I love this. All right, so that's everything in the box. Now let's go through the actual process of making the block. All right, so let's open up our material and figure out what we want to use for what. So I'll definitely be using the thread. This is going to be using the top thread. For the bobbin thread, I am using bottom line. Bottom line is cool because you can get a lot of different colors, and I just wind it around a bobbin, stick it in, easy to go. I'm going to use a yellow color, but I could use a light blue if I wanted to. So for this cute little block here, you actually have 5 colors, but 6 pieces of material, but 5 colors. It's kind of hard to tell based off the colors I chose here, but let's figure out what we want to go here, 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 and here. So I kind of like the alternating red and white. So let's do color 1, 2. I'm going to do color 3, 4, and 5. Let's do that. Color 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for the back, so you can see I have a back here since I'm making a coaster. For the back, I'll use this one, which is the same as this one, it looks like. But I'll use one of the colors from this. And then for the binding, I think I'm going to use this striped look because I love a striped binding. So I will cut this and we'll put this all together today. So here's all our material. You need very, very little if you're making the coaster. Make sure you're checking out all the projects that Kimberbell gives you so you know exactly how much of everything you need. So if you are going to be making the big pillow and you want to use this fabric here for the back of the pillow, you might not have enough. You might have to use this or use something from your own stash. So just check the fabric requirements. All right, so here's everything I'm using today. It's kind of hard to see, but today I'm using my Brother PE800 embroidery machine. This is a very affordable embroidering machine. You can get it on Amazon. I'll have a link for it down below, and it's great. Everything we make in Perfectly Pieced should be able to be used on this machine. Today I'll be making a 4" by 4" block, which means I need a bigger hoop than that. So if you want to make the really small block, I believe it's 2" by 2", you can use a 4" by 4 hoop. I am using a 5" by 7 hoop because I'm making the 4" by 4" block. So whatever size block you decide you want to do, you just got to make sure you use a hoop size that's bigger than that, okay? For my stabilizer, I'm just using this wash away mesh. I'm honestly not even going to wash it away. I'm going to keep it inside of the material for my coaster, but this is what I'll be using. And then I'm just using some scraps of quilt batting. You could also use foam here. You could use fusible fleece. There's a lot of options here, but I happen to have lots of scraps of quilt batting, so that's what I'll be using as the batting today. To attach the backing material to my little coaster, I'll be using some 505 spray. Not necessary, but highly recommended. I have some nice little snips to keep everything cleaned up. I have my curved embroidery scissors. These are definitely a must if you have an embroidery machine because we will be trimming the material and it just makes it so much easier. Then I have a stiletto. This is going to be especially helpful whenever I am making the binding. I have some masking tape. You could also use the wonderful Kimbo Brill tape. I just happen to be out of it right now. But masking tape to hold down fabric just so it doesn't move around. And then a tiny iron. I don't have a whole lot of Cricut stuff, but I tell you what, this little tiny iron is a must-have. I love this powerful little baby here. So I'll be using this, and you'll see how we use that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pick the size block you want to make, find the piecing instructions for that block in your files, and then cut out the material as necessary. So I know from fabric 1, I need 1 cut, fabric 2, I need 1 cut, from fabric 3, I need 2 cuts, fabric 4, 1 cut, fabric 5, 1 cut. And that's just because I'm making 1 coaster. If I was making 12 blocks, 16 blocks, I would need multiple cuts of everything. The project you choose in the files that MeTime offers will tell you exactly how to cut the material from the sized fabric you have. They have a diagram so you don't have to wonder, well, how am I going to get that many cuts from this size material? They have a diagram that's going to show you how to cut it. So I'm going to quickly cut out just the bits I need for my 1 coaster today. All right, so as you can see, this is just a little pressing mat. I have my pieces all cut out, stacked up, ready to go. What I'm gonna do first is hoop my stabilizers. So I'm going to grab my bottom hoop here, and I'm just going to lay my stabilizer over it, making sure it covers the entire thing. And then I'll just quickly trim this down. And then I just lay my stabilizer over that, line this up. If you're interested in all the details of this embroidery machine, I have a separate unboxing that you can go through and check out. I'll have that link down below. So I'm just gonna push my hoop in so it's nice and flat. Turn the little dial over here to get it nice and tight. There we go. So I already have my USB plugged in when it has the file that I need for the 4" by 4" blocks on it. And so now I'm just going to access it from my embroidery machine. And to do that, I will go to my flash drive, go to next, and here's my file here, set. It's telling me up here I need to use the bigger hoop, end, and embroider. There we go. Everything looks good to me. So the first thing I'm going to do is insert my hoop into the machine, and it's going to stitch out a rectangle, and that will be placement for the batting. So once I have that stitched out, I'm just going to remove the hoop real quick so I can take a closer look. Now, this square is smaller than the finished size, and that's because this is set up so that you can piece together a bunch of them. And so what I'm saying by that is, if you were to use this square as your guide, your batting will not go all the way to the edge of your block. And that's going to be helpful if you're going to be sewing a lot of these blocks together. You don't want really thick seams between each block with the batting in it. For me though, I do want the batting to go all the way to the edge. So my batting needs to be bigger than this square. So for me, my batting is cut to about 5 inches by 5 inches, just so it's bigger than I need it. And it's a bit of a sloppy cut. So when I put this down though, I'm just making sure it's overhanging all 4 edges pretty well, okay? So I'm just gonna lay this in. If you'd like to grab some tape, tape this down. Otherwise, just put it back into the machine. And now the machine is going to tack down the batting. So now I'm going to remove it again. And if you were going to make a few of these blocks and then piece them all together, you would want to lift up the batting and cut right along the stitch line. I mean, not on the stitch line, and don't cut the stabilizer, but you're going to lift this up, grab your scissors, and just cut as close to the stitch line as you can all the way around. I, however, am not going to do that because I do want my batting going all the way to the edge of the fabric today. So I'm going to put this back in the machine now. And now the next step is going to stitch out all of the placement lines that are going to be used to piece this together. So we'll be taking the hoop in and out of the machine a lot. But essentially what these lines are that we just made are pretty much just guidelines so that we can see where we need to put everything. So first we're going to take fabric number 1 and pay attention, right side up. Everything else will be right side down. But right now, fabric number 1 needs to be right side up, and you're going to line it up with the bottom left corner here. It pretty much needs to be covering this whole bottom triangle all the way to the edge. So line it up so it's completely covering that bottom left corner, right side up. And then if you want to tape it down, go ahead and tape it down. Otherwise, gently just hold it with your fingers out of the way. And we're going to stitch this down. Now take it out, and what you want to do is the little triangle piece over here on the top right, we want to cut that off. So you're going to lift it up, and you're going to cut right along the thread. Now, as close as you can get to the thread. And I know what you're thinking, but don't we need a seam allowance? The seam allowance is already accounted for. You can cut this off right along that stitch line. That stitch line is not the same for the next piece, so just cut along the stitch line. Now you're going to grab fabric number 2, and you're going to lay it right side down, and you're going to line up the top right edge, this long edge right here, right along that stitch line where you just cut the fabric. Right along the same line, okay? It's going to stitch it down with a seam allowance. Don't worry about that. So it's right side down, just like this. If you want to use some tape, go ahead and do that, and then put it back in the machine. And now we're going to stitch piece number 2 in place. Now when we take this one out, what we want to do is we want to take that piece number 2 and fold it right side up, and you can finger press right here. I do suggest you grab a little tiny iron though, because it's adorable, and it is actually very useful if you do press this down. Just carefully press right along that seam. I'm just telling you, this little tiny iron, if you have an embroidery machine, I feel like this should just come with every single little embroidery machine because it's just perfect. So we've got this nice and flat. Now we're going to put this back in the machine. And the next step is going to stitch placement for our piece number 3. So now when you take it out, you're going to lift up this top triangle bit from fabric number 2, and you're going to just cut right along the stitching. There we go. Now we're going to grab fabric number 3, and we're going to lay this right side down with the edge of the fabric, or bottom edge. If you have a directional print here, it's going to go up like this. So the bottom edge of your fabric 3, you're going to line that up right with that stitch line you just made. There we go. Keep it nice and straight. Once again, use tape if you need to. Put it back in the machine, and then stitch this in place. And then we're going to flip number 3 up. Give it a press with your fingers just to get the line nice and straight. And grab your tiny iron and iron that in place. All right, now we put it back in the machine. And we're going to stitch down fabric piece number 4. And if you're sticking with the pattern, piece number 4 is still fabric number 3. It gets a little confusing. But if you have a little triangle overhang like I do right here, you're going to lift that up and just trim right along the stitch line. Here we go. And then grab piece number 4 and lay that right side down, lining up the right edge with the stitch line. So this is what's nice, is it can be a little sloppy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's still going to turn out completely perfect. I think this is so cool. So put it back in the machine. Let's stitch it down. Now fold that fabric to the right and then press right along that seam. I mean, do you see you already have these perfect little points right in the center? And those can be pretty challenging to do if you're just piecing this with a sewing machine. All right, now let's put it back in the machine. Now we're going to stitch down placement for fabric number 4, piece number 5. So once you have that line in place, you're going to lift up these little top triangles for fabric number 3 and just cut them down. And you just cut them as much as you can right along that stitch line. There we go. Now you're going to grab your fabric number 4, which is piece number 5, and lay it right along that stitch line. Make sure it extends all the way from the beginning to the end of the stitching. And for this one, I do like to use a piece of tape because it can move around on you. So I prefer to use some sort of a masking tape that can be stitched on and easily come out of the seams. There we go. So now let's put this back in the machine. And now let's stitch this piece into place. Now, if any of your tape got stitched over, go ahead and just take your tape out. The quicker you take your tape out of stitching, the less likely it will be there forever. All right, now we're going to take that piece of fabric and we're going to flip it right side up and press right along that seam. It should all be coming together really nicely. All right, now let's put it back in the machine. And now we'll stitch placement for the final piece. And now with this piece, you can just trim off right along the stitch line. You don't have to go all the way to the short edges on these long pieces here. Just trim right along the stitch line. That's where it matters the most. Now take your final piece and you're going to lay it right side down. Again, lining it up right side against the fabric with the top edge along that stitch line. And just always make sure you're lining it up with the actual length of the stitching too. You don't want to like line it up down here. That's not going to work. There we go. And put it back in the machine. And let's stitch this last piece into place. There we go. Now I'm just going to press this right side up, finger press along that line, and press with my iron. All right, so now I'm gonna put this back in the machine and it's going to stitch down the actual like finished size of the rectangle. So we're gonna use that to help us place the backing material. So now the final step on the embroidery file is actually doing a quilt design on this block. So if you're not interested in doing the quilt design, you are gonna do it all later when you piece it together into something bigger, then just you're done. You don't have to add anything else to this. I am doing the quilt design because this is my finished block. I'm making a cute little coaster. So I'm gonna flip this over. And I have a 5" by 5" cut of backing material. This is going to be the back of my coaster. And what I want to do is take some sort of basting spray or just a lot of tape if you feel comfortable doing that. But I think the basting spray is the best. And I'm just going to spray this on the back of my material. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay it wrong side down on the back of my hooped material, making sure I'm covering the outer edges completely. So I can see the stitching, right, on the back, and I'm covering that. Now, I'm not pushing this down because I don't want to mess up my design. So I'm just gently tapping it right here. And then when I flip it over, I can give it a firmer push from the front. And now I'm going to put this back in the machine, and I'm going to run the quilting. As I'm putting this back in the machine, I'm going to make sure that this doesn't start peel. See how it can peel away right here? If this folds under, and then I do the quilting, it's kind of ruined. So I'm going to put this back in the machine and make sure that it's all nice and flat here and then run the quilting. All right, so let's run the final step, which is a beautiful quilting design that covers the entire block. All right, the file is completed. Let's take it out of the machine. So here we have our cute little block. Let's remove it from the hoop. We'll check out the back. Woohoo! It all worked out. That's nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this block out. You can see the outer rectangle, which is an outer square. It is 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. So I'm just going to cut this out so it's exactly 4.5 by 4.5. And to do that, I just use a ruler and a rotary cutter. Alrighty, look how cute this is. So now we're just going to add some binding to it, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So first off, I do have a binding calculator on the OklaRoots website. If you're interested in checking it out, I'm going to be using that to figure out exactly how much binding I need for this. So based off my calculator, I just need 1 strip of material, cut it with the fabric, and I'm going to cut it 2.5 inches wide. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut the very bottom raw edge, just so I can get a nice straight line down here. There we go. So that's just the very little bit cut off. And then I'm going to cut 2.5 inches. And now I'm just going to iron this so that it is folded wrong sides together. And if you have the selvage on the edge, make sure you cut that off too. We don't want that there. So I'm just going to trim it off. And you can see the method I'm using today is not precise. So with quilting and binding, we can get very precise, very detailed. I am trying to do kind of the quickest, easiest, but cutest way to put it all together. So here's my binding. I'm just going to fold it wrong sides together, long sides together. And then I'm just going to iron along that fold. And I'm going to go down the whole edge doing this. All right, so now we're going to get to the sewing machine, just a regular sewing machine, not an embroidery machine. And what we want to do is take our binding, and we're going to lay our binding, and we're going to work on the back side of our coasters. So looking at the back side, I'm going to take my binding and lay it so that the folded edge is going in towards the center, and the raw edge is along the raw edge of my coaster. And I'm going to start it in the middle, just like that. I'm actually going to use these adorable little clips they sent over. I love them. And I'm going to just clip this in place. There we go. And again, I have a full tutorial going in detail over binding coasters, lots of different methods. But what we're going to do is we're going to start here. I'm going to start about 1/2 inch away from the edge. So starting at 1/2 inch away from the raw edge of the binding, I'm going to sew this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to stop once I get a 1/4 inch away from this right edge over here, and then I'm going to back stitch, okay? So I'm just going to do that, and then we're going to come back and talk. Okay, so now that I have just this little bit stitched on, again, I have the folded edge pointing in towards the center, I'm going to fold my binding up like this. And you can see I'm kind of holding it down here on the side because I want my binding to create a nice little diagonal. And the raw edge of my binding, I want it to line up perfectly with the raw edge of my coaster. You see how it just goes straight up like that? That's exactly how I want it. So just give it a little finger press. And then holding down the edge, just like this, fold that binding back down so that the little folded bit up here matches up with the raw edge on the top, and the raw edge of your binding matches up with the raw edge on the right. This is one of those things that seems a lot harder when you're seeing it than it is when you're doing it. It's easier when you're doing it. So now I'm just going to clip along this edge. And now I'm going to start at the very top of here, go down and backstitch, and sew all the way down this side at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, again stopping a 1/4 inch before I get to the bottom edge here and backstitching there. All right, there we go. We got it stitched on. Now let's rotate the unit. And once again, we're going to just pull the binding up so that we have a nice little 45-degree angle right here. The raw edge of the binding is lining up with the raw edge of our coaster. Hold down the side of that while you pull down the binding, lining up the top edge with the fold and the raw edge over here. There we go. Grab some clips and just clip it into place. And we're going to start off the edge and go down, backstitch at the beginning, stop a 1/4 inch before you reach the bottom and make sure you backstitch, and sewing once again at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okie dokie, let's rotate it again. Once again, pull the material up so that it's straight with the edge. If it pulls a little further than you want it to, just kind of roll it down with your fingers so that it matches up. And then fold the binding down once again. Line it up with the right edge. Looking good. And now let's clip it into place. Just like before, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down and stop a 1/4 inch before you get to the bottom. Okay, now rotate it again, and here's what I want to do this time. So I'm going to fold it up like I have been doing, fold it down, and this is a different method for me, okay? So it works though, but I'm going to fold it down, and I'm going to pull it down, and I want it to extend over the first bit by a 1/2 inch, okay? So it should extend until we get towards these stitches over here. It can extend a little bit further than that, that's fine. And then I'm going to grab some scissors, and I'm going to cut the binding here. I'll fold it up like that. I'm going to cut the binding so that it is just past the stitching. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this short edge right here, and I'm just going to fold it wrong sides together by about a 1/4 inch seam allowance just to hold it down. And you don't need to top stitch this, but I will. I'm going to top stitch right along this folded edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that that edge is top stitched, refold the long bit here, and then once again pull your binding up and then bring it down. And now I'm just going to add a clip over here on the corner so it doesn't move around on me. And what I want to do now is lift up that starting bit of our binding, all of it, lift it up, lay down the end bit that has the top stitching, and just tuck in that starting portion, wrapping the end around it. You see, so now what we're doing is we're enclosing the raw edges of the beginning of the binding with the folded over edge on the end of the binding. So just tuck it all in there, get it lined up over on the folded side. That's the main part that needs to be lined up. So on this folded edge over here, get that nice and straight. Add some clips to hold it in place. And now starting over the top edge, we're going to sew down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you're covering this and go all the way until you go over the beginning stitches over here on the bottom right. Okay, so now we have the binding completely attached to the back, and all we have to do now is wrap it around to the front. So I'm going to start where my overlap is, and I'm just going to gently, making sure they can still separate, so try to make sure they don't. Once we get it top stitched on, you don't have to worry about it, but at this step, you do. So right here where they're connected, I'm going to wrap it around to the front of my coaster. It doesn't have to be incredibly tight. You just want to make sure the wrapped edges stay together and they cover the stitching you just made when attaching your binding. So I'm just going to fold it over gently There we go. And then I'll grab a clip and hold it in place. So I'm going to do this for the straight edge here. And once you get to a corner, what I do is I just kind of pull out the right side. So you can see the folded edge here is going straight over, and then I have a little diagonal right here. So I keep that diagonal and I fold over the edge so that the corner of that little diagonal bit comes to meet the bottom edge on the top. So you have like a nice little corner and a 45-degree angle going down in between them. And then I'm just going to continue doing this all the way around. Alrighty, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to top stitch right along the edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Once you get to the corners, just do your best to make sure your needle is in the next piece of fabric. Lift up your presser foot, turn your material, and then continue stitching. Just go slow here. And there you go, a super cute, quick little mini quilt coaster that has some really nice quilting on it. I mean, the quilting on it is better than what I would be able to do just freehand. So I think that's just the cutest. I hope you guys love making these. So what do you guys think? How cute is this? I love these little guys. And I don't know. I gotta be honest, whenever I first heard about this, about making a quilt block in an embroidery machine, I know some of you guys have been doing this for a while. This is the first time I've ever done it. I was a little intimidated. I was like, that seems like it's going to be really complicated. And I think for maybe really, really basic blocks, it might be easier to just do it on the sewing machine. But if you see how perfect these points are, how it all comes together so neatly, it turns out exactly the size you want it to turn out. When you have a more complicated block with a lot of little pieces, this is going to be a game changer. I mean, I can't tell you how many blocks I've made with little tiny pieces and they just don't end up lining up like they're supposed to line up. So I'm very excited about this. I really, really like it. And if you make the coaster, let me know. I want to know. I personally love coasters. Now, I do want to make the pillows and I want to make the table runners that they suggest in the pattern. But for me, right now, I have such a little amount of time. I got the kids home from school. We're trying to entertain. We're trying to get everything done. So I don't always have a ton of time to make things in my craft room. So, like, this is perfect. Oh, this is so cute. And if you wanted to, you could use your own embroidery design. You can embroider everybody's names. Oh my gosh. What if you had like a bunch of people over for 4th of July or just a summer barbecue just for fun, and you embroidered everybody's name on their own little custom coaster? That would be so cute. You could give it with like a little drink or a little coffee, or, you know, for like a teacher, whenever we go back to school, you could give it with like a gift card to the teachers. Okay. Adding it all to my list. I have a lot of these to make. So thank you so much to Me Time for sponsoring today's video and allowing me to be a part of this super fun, perfectly pieced monthly quilt block project. I'm so excited. I mean, if this is what we're starting off with, this is how we're kicking it off in July. I cannot wait to see what's coming next. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.